Hello and good morning, evening or afternoon, depending on when you are watching this latest Susty Talk from Edie. Susty Talks being our exclusive series of one-on-one video interviews designed to keep us all feeling a bit more connected to the global sustainable business conversation. And as part of our Climate Finance Week, I'm delighted to have on the phone with me today Palladium's Managing Director of Impact Investment and Business Growth, Jose Maria Ortiz. So thank you very much for your time. Whereabouts are you dialing in from today?
I'm dialing in from our office here in London.
Yeah, it's a hot day, but I think we've said off call that having lived in Spain, you're probably more used to this than me.
The only issue, as we were discussing before this call, this is a clear example of what is going to be happening with the climate change now, and I think that's probably it's a good day to have this conversation because that exemplifies some of the challenges we have in the coming years.
Of course, climate resilience couldn't be higher on hearts and minds at the moment. And today we're here to talk about all things climate finance per the title of our Climate Finance Week campaign. And we've worked with Palladium before, but for those that aren't aware, it would be great to start with an introduction to the company and then also an introduction to yourself, so your career and what your role entails.
So look, Palladium is one of the large organizations in the world solely focused on delivering impact. No, we are an organization that's been operating for 57 years. We're more 90 countries, 3,500 people. And what we do is projects that transform the lives of people in different countries using, in many cases, some donor capital, but in others, private sector capital to deliver impact. No? So that's what we work, and we work in many sectors: health, economic growth, climate, as we will discuss today, emergency relief, and many others in the space of impact. And I am Jose Maria Ortiz. My role is mainly building solutions that mobilize private sector capital for impact. We use lots of our projects are funded by governments, but we do think that many of the objectives that we want to achieve are within the responsibility of private sector organizations, and they can create business models that benefit their core business. So my job in Palladium is to try to find these solutions that can be either investable by investors or can be delivered through partnership with multinationals, transforming their supply chains to make them more sustainable and at the same time improving their P&L and their financial outcomes.
That relationship and collaboration between public and private finance is something we're focusing on a lot this week and something that's so important, and we can come on to that a little bit later. And I wanted to get a feel as well for how the team works at Palladium with those things, as you say, built in to the business. So do you sort of head up things like climate, or is there a dedicated sustainability team, and how does that get onto the board? How does the board interact with that as well?
So I think there's two different things that here is important. We deliver climate programs across the world. That's something that we do for clients. We do it for the UK government, we do it for the US government, we do it for the Australian government, and we do it with private sector organizations and investors. So one of our business lines is around mobilizing capital for climate solutions. There's another part that is how do we tackle the sustainability issues related to our own activities, which for this we have a team within Palladium that is distributed across the entire business, that is the Sustainable Business Group, that what does is all the things related to our own sustainability. So I think I would respond, these are the two things. We have teams and structure and business units solely focused on solving that for clients, and we have our own internal teams, and obviously there's a lot of overlap of people that have this strong knowledge about climate that help us to offset or to increase our sustainability as an organization.
That makes sense. And yeah, I'd love to start with some of the climate work that you've been involved in, and overarching all of these projects, as you mentioned, are some really built-in commitments on this. And I know that the company is a member of organisations like Business Ambition for 1.5C, Science Based Targets Initiative. So I wanted to get your view on what it's like to have that top level commitment and to collaborate with it as an impact investment firm. Obviously, a lot of these things are pan industry.
So look, for us, it's something that we fully believe in. We believe that organizations need to commit to be net zero by 2050, and they need to do it using scientific approaches for that. And obviously, under this premise, that is something we pitch to all our clients, we apply the same methodology to ourselves. And therefore, what we've done, if we sign to these different groups, and obviously we use SBTI as the methodology to calculate our impact, and then based on that to reduce our emissions, which we have a strong commitment to do two things: reduce our own emissions and make sure that as a very big organization, we make many of the companies that work on our value chain to commit as well to reduce their emissions. No? So we have a very strong commitment to have 2/3 of our key providers to commit to targets under the SBTI methodology. So we have a multiplier effect. It's not only us, it's us and the entire value chain behind it. So that's the first part. The second part is the part that we cannot reduce our emissions. We want to offset them using our strengths, and our strengths is to develop projects. We develop climate projects in many places. We do that for clients. So instead of using our money to offset by buying carbon, what we do is invest in projects, and we provide, besides the money, technical assistance and support for those projects to generate impact that obviously we benefit by getting some offsets of our carbon footprint, but especially what we want to demonstrate is that those solutions are commercially viable and they benefit the communities, and the communities at the center. Also, in the last years, we have developed 2 projects, one in the Amazon, another one in Zambia, and this year probably a new one, which we select every year through a internal competition where people propose those projects, and we use our capability as an organization to not only generate carbon, but generate socioeconomic impact on those societies.
And when you say climate projects, do you mean something like renewable energy or clean cooking stoves or nature or something else?
Basically nature-based solutions, agroforestry or forest conservation or reforestation of ecosystems that as well bring biodiversity benefits and social benefits to the communities. That's where we are focusing for the time being. That doesn't mean that at one point we don't want to move to other type of solutions like the one you mentioned about cook stoves, which could be very interesting. Less so in our case would be around energy, because we think there's already lots of business models around that. So we want to take a riskier approach to create markets for the future so others can pick up on the solutions that we have built, more than using business models that are already proven, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I wanted to ask, with nature-based solutions, we've talked about collaboration a little bit before, but looking at some case studies of these projects, it's crucially important that they involve multiple stakeholders. So when you're dealing with a big bit of land, you probably have a government of some kind, community groups, local communities, people with expertise about that specific ecosystem. So what is the role of a company like Palladium to come in and do that, and how do you collaborate to get those projects going?
So I think there's certain elements that are very important. I would assume that most of the people are hearing us today, they understand that, but many other people do not understand that. Preserving nature means preserving as well the ways of living of many people that are living in those communities. More of the landscape, there's people living in there, there's indigenous communities or there's communities. So we need to bring them with us in that journey. That's not about people or nature, it's people within nature. No? So I would say the core element of all our interventions is bringing the local communities and offering them possibilities to develop socioeconomic opportunities while developing the natural-based solution. So that would be at the core of the design, and that's our capability, design projects that bring these natural and social benefits together. That would be one. Once we've done this, then we need to bring, I would say, 2 other players, no? Investors and off-takers that understand the value of that solution. And obviously, in some cases, we need some government support. But if the project is well designed, the latter is the less important. The more important is the very strong project design, and then bringing along like-minded investors and off-takers that reduce the risk. Obviously, we play a role as an investor in this type of projects as well, so that we give comfort to other investors that are looking for high-quality projects. They know if Palladium is developing that project, is investing in that project, there's going to be high quality, high integrity in the outcomes that are produced, so they are more inclined to come with us. And we have a roster of off-takers we work with normally, either many times as clients that want to join us as well in procuring natural outcomes or even commodities from those projects, no? Which makes the entire business model much more robust and creates a proof point that then others may want to replicate, or even that allows those communities to expand those projects to be bigger and to have more scope.
That makes sense. And if collaboration is one of the big C's regarding nature-based solution, the other one is probably continuity, because we're now at this probably new phase of nature-based solutions where a lot of big projects are in the works. So what happens beyond project design and getting all of that work together? How does Palladium provide assistance sort of once the project's up and running beyond the inception point?
Well, for us, a project is a 25-year intervention. No, that's the beauty, at least as Palladium business model, as a big implementer of larger scale programs. We know that change takes time. We know that programs do not happen in 3 months, in 1 year. We know that this will take a long period of time. So we work with those communities as long as the project lasts, providing technical assistance and support, and working with them through the entire project, because at the end those projects are for the next 25 years, and we need to make sure that the permanence of the intervention is going to be there, no, after these 25 years, no, and that's something we understand very well. That's something that our business model allows us to work with. This is not about something quick and something fast. That's not our mentality. And I know that sometimes that's a challenge for some of the investors in the more hardcore business community, where they are used to shorter periods of times for the interventions, while in this case, we're talking about interventions that will last for several decades.
I'm sure, as you mentioned, that permanence of intervention will be front of mind now, and that we've had infrastructure built here in the UK, and now it's melting and catching fire. So will it do more in 25 years? So super important. And you mentioned there's something that I wanted to talk about a little bit about how change takes time, and sometimes it takes longer for financial returns from nature-based solutions than maybe for renewable energy, and sometimes the benefits are different. So carbon sequestration, biodiversity, reliance for local communities. So how do you communicate that to investors? Is there like a growing class of people that are willing to wait and look at different non-financial metrics at this point in time?
I think investors are beginning to understand more the asset class, which is very different than other asset classes. And they are beginning to elaborate products that can play against this or with this asset class, no? And there's not only one solution. There's some of investors that are willing to take a much higher risk and higher return by being in the project preparation phase, and then when the project is ready, sell it to someone that wants to give the long-term finance on a project that is already proven that can be successful, no? There are others that want to play by reducing the risk of the projects by buying the carbon and then getting profits on the deltas between the price they buy and the price they sell. So we see a much more sophisticated approach to investment in nature, with different investors coming to play different roles, and some of them taking bigger risks, bigger returns, and some of them understanding this as a project finance. And at the end of the day, we have to think about nature very similarly to how we think about infrastructure. The only thing is natural infrastructure. People are used to fund 25 years road programs on airports or ports. This exists. It's an industry that exists. So if we find the way to translate this knowledge and this expertise into natural infrastructure, we will find that the products that we use for infrastructure, with certain changes and certain adaptations, can be created and adapted to natural capital. The only issue is that still investors are not fully able to assess some of the underlying risks. You were talking about melting. We can be talking about fires. We can be talking about permanence. We can be talking about this type of risks. Still investors do not have enough data points of how the risk can pan out in the natural capital, and some of them, therefore, are a little bit more cautious. So here is where governments or other institutions or philanthropic institutions can come in, giving them some risk reduction mechanisms that allow them to invest more capital, but have some elements of downside protected. And therefore create enough data points for them to understand those risks better and do like in any industry, no? That has long-term commitments and long-term cash flows.
I'm presuming that as well as risk reduction, there's a piece there about measuring the risk in the first place, because I've been looking at TCFD recently and the quality of reporting isn't always great and the understanding of risk isn't always great. So is there an opportunity for intervention on getting people to actually measure those risks and opportunities better?
I think that's one of the key elements. So if you can measure risk, you can manage it, and therefore you can price it, and therefore you can create investment mechanisms or insurance mechanisms associated to those risks. The issue is you need data. You need data to do risk management, and you need data points. And I think there's here two things: having enough projects that produce enough data, that's one. But second, having companies or solutions that can measure this data and make sense out of it and offer it to the investors community. And I think we need to work on both. We need to work having more projects that produce more data points, which is already undergoing. And we need to accelerate on those companies that collect this data to create data frameworks that allow people to measure risks and therefore manage them and price them into the project. So yes, data is critical to be able to manage risk.
And that's probably why I'm in journalism and not in your sort of job. I'm not really a data numbers person, but nonetheless, data is something that we're going to be following very closely this year and for the rest of Climate Finance Week. Well, I'm nearly out of time on our call today, but thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and a pleasure being here.